Hi there, this is Dawn. Welcome back to my art room. Today I'm going to start making a zippered pouch by hand, and I thought it was a good project to share with you. Lots of people seem to really enjoy making things by hand, and I've found this to be a really useful little purse that I've made. So I'm going to make a pencil case for myself, but I'm also going to make a pouch as a gift for a friend. So this might go over a couple of videos, but it'll also be one of those stop-start so that you've got a chance to go and prepare things, because while I can go through a level of steps, we can't complete it in one continuous video. It would probably be all day. All right, I hope you're really good, but we all are. It's a little bit of a busy weekend, and I thought I just had a short amount of time now, little window of opportunity to hop in. This pouch I made during the previous Roxy's Journal of Stitchery Volume 5, where we made a pouch, and I chose to make a zippered pouch. And this pouch has tabs so that the zip doesn't fold over the sides. Now, my first disclaimer is I did this one on the machine. I wanted it a little bit more robust. There's a couple of little things that I want to work through with you. And these are some fabrics that I've had in my stash for a very long time. They still had the paper piecing inside that I'd done originally, and I found one piece that since I've been mucking about here, I've lost it, but it actually had the date of 1976, and I think that would probably be about right. I might have started collecting the fabrics in that year and began cutting them out as well, but they were all paper pieced by hand. So, and I still have some of that fabric, so I've decided to use it again. I didn't have all of these squares stitched together. I still had them in this form, so I'm happy to go through that quickly now to show you what I did to join if you're not sure about that. And I intend to decorate the front, but I wanted to get started on the zip part because the rest is going to take a little bit of time. So my first thing that I want to talk to you about, and this is sort of just my playing around with what I might put on the front and haven't quite decided yet, is the measurements for this project will probably really be up to you and what you have. Now, I had collected randomly from some place that was getting rid of bags of zips. This is one I had. So the rule of thumb is that you would cut your fabric 1 inch longer than the zip if you want to do it with the tab. And that's the way that I'm going to do this project, so that you'll have a 1/2 inch on either side. This, if you really want to know, this zip is a 7-inch zip, or nearly 8 centimetre. It's just a little bit under centimetres, but it was probably made in the inch time frame. And my piece of paper, my piece of fabric is 10 inches long, because we've got this little bit of extra here as well. So those little bit of extras are almost nearly 1 inch more longer than the actual part of the zip. And as I said, this zip is one that I had. So when I put it on the fabric is a 1/2 inch longer than the tape of the zip, not the teeth of the zip, because we're going to cover it with a tab. I've already started actually stitching on this. I've cut the wadding I like to use Pelham or a Parlane, different names in different places, but not very thick, but just enough to give me some density. This actually is an iron-on one, and I'm happy to use that. So I've ironed it onto the back, but I've ironed it that half an inch, I've cut it that half an inch shorter on all sides, because what happened with this one, I had the Parlane go all the way to the edges. So when I turned the seam, it made it a bit bulky to actually stitch inside. Bulky to turn sharp corners out. So I thought, well, for this one I might try to do it a little bit differently. So yes, so that's the first little bit of measuring that you need to do. Your fabric 1 inch longer than the zip with the tabs. The next piece of measuring is the tabs. Now I had these pieces of fabric, and so I've chosen to use them. They were actually squares that were, you know, stitched together separately, but I quite liked the colour of it, and I like this little bit of bright pop. So folding it in half, the measurement to cut these tabs is that the ends of the zip need to fit inside, and you need to have some turnover so that your fabric is folded front and back with a fold here in line with the start of the zip and the end of the zip. And so it works like that. So this piece of fabric is 2.5 inch square, and I just folded in perhaps 1/4 inch seam allowance. Didn't really measure that, just folded it in. Yes, 1/4 inch seam allowance, just to make sure that that's neatened off there. So the end of the zip sits in that halfway fold, and those pieces come together, and that's how we'll stitch them on. And that's actually the first bit of stitching that we'll do. So I'll stop here, and if you'd like to go and collect some bits and pieces, you can come back. But what I'm going to do is stitch these ends along here, along this line here, and I'll just do a simple running stitch there, because it will be caught in. Leave yourself a little bit of, you know, over the edge here just to play with, but we'll cut those off. Okay, we'll be back in 2 seconds. I just thought I would share with you my stitching of this. I recommend leaving the zip closed, because the minute you open it, it splays, and it's just difficult to move it back in neatly. So for this part of the process, leave the zip closed so that you know that it's going to go in straight. And I think that's probably the best bit of advice I can give you. What I did omit to say a moment ago when we were looking at measurements and what we were using, you'll need obviously 2 pieces for the front and back, but you'll also need 2 pieces for the lining, exactly the same measurement. I had this funny old plate. I think it was like a serviette, but it's got an unusual coating, and I didn't know what else I was going to do with it, so I thought that'll make a lining. And it's the same size as the actual piece, because you need the seam allowance on that. So my apologies that I omitted to say that bit. I picked out a thread that was as close a match as what I had. I've stitched this one and it's, you know, quite neat. It's not going to come apart. We will be top stitching it with another thread, so it doesn't need to be sewn down within an inch of its life at this point. I just did a simple running stitch. When I got to this teeth part, I did do a back stitch and kept going. I didn't stitch these because we're going to trim those off, and I didn't want to cut my threads given that it was it's being done by hand. I have put a zip in by hand. I did it on this little purse. This purse is a pattern by Jennifer Clouston, and I'll link her YouTube channel in the description box because this pattern is hers and I'm not going to share this pattern with you, but I just wanted to reassure you that you can get quite a nice finish with hand stitching a zip in. This one's got a tab that's buried and my purse will be slightly different, but yeah, if you want to have a look at what she does, please go and visit her YouTube channel. All right, back to this little process. So hopefully you've got your zip. I quite often, often find zips in the op shop, repurposed ones. Sometimes they can be marked and they're not always the prettiest, but you could wash it if that's the case. Otherwise, it would mean purchasing a zip new if you don't have a little supply. If you've got a zip that's just way too long for what you want to make as a purse, you can cut the zips, and while I'm not going to do it, I can show you what to do, because when you've got these tabs, if you've cut the zip, you know, here, say, and your tab will fit, you'll just leave that well, if you only want the zip to be that long, sorry, and then you would cut, you know, cut it, you put the tab over this end. But prior to that, I would put just a couple of back stitches through the teeth just to hold it together, to be very sure. Metal ones probably hold together a bit easier but harder to cut. You just have to go slowly between the teeth. The nylon ones are easy to cut, but they spring apart fairly easily. So you need to get your tab on fairly soon after doing, but a couple of little stitches where you want to, where you want the zip to end, and then cut beyond that. And that'll safeguard what you're doing. You can pin through the zip, but I've got these little clips and I'm happy to use them. On this end where the zip finishes here, I'm again just doing that little back stitch just as a little bit of extra security, and matching this fold to the one, mind you, could be a little bit better than that, but matching those two folds together because you want to catch them both. Don't want to have, you know, a gap. And so you can see that this is on the inside. You're never going to see that, but I have put a bigger stitch just where the actual zip ends, just to safeguard it from coming out. That's what I'm trying to say to you. Cool. And then I just bury the knot in here somewhere, just so I know I'm not going to cut it off. All fingers and thumbs today. Oh, goodness. All right. Using a matching thread, you're less likely to see the stitch if you're Goodness me, whatever am I doing here? It's just like completely got itself in a twist here. There we go. Let's cut it off quick. Okay. Right, so that's done. When that's done, you can trim it then, or you can trim it later. So with the right side of the zip facing the right side of the fabric, what you want to do is make sure you've left yourself that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Line the zip up with the edge of the fabric, and then with your lining piece the same. Right sides of the lining, right side of the fabric facing each other, and line that up on there as well. We can cut that bit of the zip off in a minute. I think the quilt clips work quite well in this situation because it is quite bulky. And so keeping those edges lined up there. It's going to depend, your seam allowance is going to depend on, let me get these clips on first and then we can talk about that, is how much of the zip you want to see. A normal, and all of these processes can be done on the machine in exactly the same order, if that's the way you want to go ahead with it. But I did want to do this one completely by hand. I know that it works and I'm happy with the end result. So depending on how much of this zip you want to see as to what your seam allowance is going to be, I probably want I want to see it a bit more than that. I mean, it will once it's sewn, you know, it will be more evident, but I think I'm going to do, you know, maybe a 1/4 inch seam, because when we turn it over, we're going to be top stitching it as well. So if you're concerned at all about making it straight, rule yourself a line. It's not going to hurt. You're not going to see it. Maybe pick a pen that you can, you know, heat, remove by the heat, iron it off. This is just giving me a basic idea of where my seam allowance is going to be. This is my 1/4 inch measurement here. And then you can follow that along, just giving yourself that idea that that's where you want your seam allowance to be. And on the bag part, I will definitely do that 1/2 inch, but as I said, I just want to see the zip, and so it's not really going to be, you know, it doesn't matter that I'm taking up different seam allowance. Oh, can't see that needle and thread that had the blue thread in it. It's gone. Done a disappearing act. Okay, it's here. No, it's not. Gosh, here. Sorry about that. All right, I'll get started, stop the video and finish it so that you can just see what I'm doing, because as I said, I don't really want this video to go for hours on end. I just want to be able to give you the basics so that you can go away and have a go yourself. We're going to start right on the end here. And we're going to, I'm going to just do a back stitch simply because I don't really want it to gape. I don't think that and it's something usable, so I just want it to look a little bit better. So following along that line that I've got, I never find that they look particularly pretty back stitches. They seem to go a bit all over the place, but it's going to be hidden. You're never going to see it. We're not going to top. It's not a feature of the project. It's just simply a means of getting it to stay together. So back stitch is where you go back to the previous stitch and come forward, you know, a little bit, so that you've got the thread basically in the middle. And go back, come forward, and try not to make it too big, because again you'll get the gaps. One of the size needle that I quite like using, well, this is a Birch brand, but you could probably have any brand that you particularly like. These are called Sharps, and it's a size 10. I find it's got quite a small hole, so it's harder to use it for, say, a pearl cotton, but for something like this it goes in really easily for your normal sewing thread. And we're going through a number of layers here, so you also want to protect your hands and your fingers a little bit. Okay, I'm going to keep going like this till the end, and then I'll come back. While I was working on it, I noticed that this yellow fabric was really starting to fray much more than I had actually expected it to, because it had this coating on it. I hadn't planned for that. I have a pair of pinking shears. If you've got some, you might want to do the same. Because we're not neatening it, you can knead it. You could zigzag a stitch over the edge if you were using a sewing machine, or overstitch it by hand. I just decided to use the pinking shears because they were going to be quick and easy. And I was concerned that the more I handled this fabric, so this other fabric's not doing it, but it's just this funny yellow stuff that I have no idea what it is. As I said, it was, I think, a serviette. Probably came in something. I only had one, so I don't know where it came from. Doesn't look like it had ever been used. It's one of those lucky dip things. All right, I've stitched all along here with that back stitch so that it's going to hold together. You can trim these bits off here now that are sticking out, and that's why I didn't stitch to the end, because I didn't want to cut my hand stitching thread, and I wanted to leave that trim until I've done this, so that I knew that I've caught everything in. And so yeah, now you can see a bit more of that zip. Is it the straightest zip that ever was put in? Possibly not, but you know, don't mind. And so the other side is exactly the same. What I have been doing is hand stitching, just doing some running stitch in between things here, and I'll continue to work on it. What I haven't done is I haven't stitched all the way to the end, simply because that's in my seam allowance. So this is going to be exactly the same process as before. So zip to the right side of the fabric, leaving that little bit of seam allowance on either side, you know, to the edge. Then again, the right side of the lining to the zip as well, so that your right sides of your fabric are facing each other. Clip it into place and back stitch it. Oh, I probably should have pinked that yellow. This one I didn't do that. but I will. So the next step when I come back is that they will be done, and so that when we open it, it'll look like that. Now this is where we're going to top stitch, and for this video I'm not going to go any further than that because I want to do the embellishment. But if you already had your embellishment done, organised, after you've stitched here, top stitched here, it would be then time to put your bag together. And this is where that seam allowance comes into place. You don't stitch over this tab. You make sure that you can match those, match those seam allowances up. Keep the tab out of the way inside. You can just sort of like bend it through there. We stitch all around other than leave a gap here, stitch it all around, flip it inside out. But I'm going to show you all of that. It's for those of you who are going, I know what to do next, I'm going to do it. But I'll come back for another, a little quick bit because I want to do the top stitching after I've done this. I'll be back. So I've finished sewing both sides now. When you're doing yours, this is what it should look like. The right side or the inside of your lining up, you should see the back of the zip. With the bag on the right side, this is the front, this is the back. You'll see the zip facing up to you. I'm just going to give it a press because before I top stitch, while I wait for the iron to warm up, that was silly. Turn the video on. I can't decide what to top stitch it in. I've had a bit of a think about some pearl cotton on here. That's just a plain blue. I've had a think about a variegated one, which I think goes quite nicely with it, which might actually be my choice. But I've also thought about just normal DMC threads, depending on how you want it to look. But we are going to be top stitching on the material, not on the zip. What your preference is. I think I'm going for that variegated one. You could try some wool if that's what you want to do. That's quite pretty, but I think I'm going to go for this bluer one. I think that's my choice at the moment. I'm just doing a bit of auditioning here as to what I think. No, I think I'm going to go for that variegated one. I think I've talked myself into that one sufficiently. All right. And so away from the zip, that's the seam that you stitched. I don't know what that black line is. It was on the fabric. This was a piece of secondhand, pre-loved. Could have possibly been a piece of sheeting, and I don't. So my intention is to cover it with something, and do the same, just so you've got that nice crisp edge to stitch down with your top stitching, because it needs to be caught. Good. And I'll start the top stitching with you and probably leave it at that for today, because as I said, I want to do the embellishment now prior to going any further. And the reason I wanted to get the zip in before I'd finished the embellishing, I probably could have gone a little bit closer with those stitches, is I didn't want lace and bits and pieces coming in over where I needed to turn it for the zip, because it's just easier to do that stitching if you don't have any bulk. But you can see here where my original back stitch was here and turned over. If it's a bit wobbly, it doesn't really matter. With straight stitching, you probably do want it to be a little neater with your top stitching. Is that going to get me all the way around? A little bit longer. I don't probably want to stop and start. I'm going to pick a needle with a bigger eye because this is quite... I just want to make sure it's sharp. Will it go through? Oh, yeah. Well, we'll try that one. I don't know what size it is. Fairly decent by the look of it. But this was a thicker pearl cotton, and I knew that I needed a bigger eye. Sorry, muttering away to myself here. So the top stitching is only going to go across the top here. We're going to come across the tab here and then back down and across the tab here. And that's all the top stitching, because now the rest is going to be caught in with your seam allowances. So starting, bury your knot inside because you don't want to see that. But if I start, oh, I didn't trim those bits off. I'm going to trim those bits off, sorry. That was that second side, so busy ironing it. Forgot to do those bits. Just trying to work out the bulk. All right, I'm going to start this stitching at one tab and from the inside. Now you can go, goodness, why doesn't it want to go in there? All right, here. You can go right on the fold line if that's what you want to do, or you can step back with it. You can make a decorative, you could do anything. But I'm just going to do a plain running stitch. And I've mentioned once before in my videos, oh yeah, this is probably a bit too thick, this needle. Oh no, I've got it. It's just on that little bit of seam bulk. And you do want those, if you're worried about them, pop a clip in to hold them back. But that's the purpose of ironing. So using your fingers on either side, keep them neat. Oh yeah, this needle is a bit tough. I'll persevere with it for a little bit longer, but if it doesn't improve, I'll have to change it. It's thick, and we're going through the thickest part, which is where that zip end was. It's a bit easier when it's just fabric. Now, all along, I've kept the zip closed. You might find it easier to manage with the zip open now. It doesn't really matter. We've got it all down. We've got it all stitched in place, but there's somewhere to hang on to. I'm just making sure that my fingers keeping that down and that down, because they're stitched with the same seam allowance. You should catch both the top and the bottom at the same time. Oh, this isn't fun, this needle. I might have to look for another one. But that's all right. It's a bit slow going. You'll see the stitches depending on how big you make them. I might try and make a little bit smaller than that. I think it's the needle that made that happen. I'm just going to see what I can find and see if there's a slightly better one here. Oop. Oh yeah, that one might be a bit better. Let's give that one a whirl. And if you don't like the stitch like I don't, I think that one is ugly. I'm going to get rid of that, bring that back out. Bit easier to unpick than machine stitching. Now, but again, if you're making this by machine, top stitch on your machine, you might want to pick, you know, a fancy thread, variegated thread, stitch it in the same. My orange one, it's just, I just didn't make a feature of the top stitching. Still top stitched it because that keeps the fabric and the lining together away from the zip. But I didn't use a fancy stitch. I just top stitched it. Gosh, that piece of thread is driving me silly. But you can't even see it. Just machine stitched it. With this one, I used perhaps even a DMC. Oh no, might have used a pearl cotton to go across there. Can't see it on the outside, but you can see it on the inside. Yes, and the little, and oh, the form on the floor. Smaller stitches, which just look a little bit nicer. And so take your time. There's no rush. I just have a couple of retreats coming up that I'm going to be going to, and that I know that I'll want to take my iron off pen or my permanent marker. I might want to take grey lead, and I've made this pouch big enough for my scissors to fit in as well. And I think that way my tools are pretty much all in the same place. You might want to get the pliers out. You might have a better needle. I've probably got a better needle somewhere. I'm just not going to go look for it while I'm having a chat with you, because that will just take too much time. So I'll keep going with that. I'll leave you to do your own thing. Sorry, show you on the back. Way better. I think the big needle, the bigger needle, forced me to do a longer stitch because it was harder to get through, but that's all right. I'll just take my time with this. And so while I've got the patchwork on the back, I'm not going to do very much. And I just thought that goldy colour on the inside, bringing some gold to the outside might look cute. We will make a zipper fob, and on the front I fancy doing wool embroidery, and I've just got this Appleton crewel embroidery wool. I don't have it in heaps of colours, but I also had some bits and bobs of embroidery from doilies that I cut out, and just thought that they would look cute on there. I thought that I would make some hexagons out of the same fabrics to add to here, but that's for another day. All right, have fun. Hope the zipper pouch worked out okay, and we'll come back and finish it off another day, maybe tomorrow. Hope you're having a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.